1. My Aunt Sheila was in her early 20s going through a messy divorce from her husband, Jerry. She had a 1-year-old and was heavily pregnant with their second child, with no job opportunities in sight. So, out of pure desperation, she moved in with my grandparents and signed up for food stamps until she could get child support. Now, back then, the food stamps were made of paper that looked like Monopoly money, and could be embarrassing to use, especially in a small conservative town. Aunt Sheila was only allotted $30 in food stamps that month, so my grandmother gave her $70 in cash and a short grocery list for the house and told my aunt to include whatever she was hungry for, because my grandmother knew how powerful pregnancy cravings could be. Aunt Sheila was nervous about using food stamps, so she stuffed them in her billfold behind the 20s and 5s that Grandma had given her. She made the rounds of the store, picking up all the items on Grandma's list first. She then made a beeline for the only food she'd been craving for days, rotisserie chicken. Her toddler, my cousin Scotty, squealed with approval, and they headed for the checkout line. Aunt Sheila was nervous about this interaction, and prayed that the cashier wouldn't give her away as a welfare mom. She unloaded everything from Grandma's list first so she could bag it separately, and put the rotisserie chicken on the conveyor belt last. The total came to just under $100. My aunt fanned out the cash with the food stamps hidden on the bottom. Because of the line behind her, she whispered to the cashier that $30 of it was in food stamps. Just then, the cashier stopped and looked over all the items. Then she turned on a red blinking light over her register and started shouting for a manager, as half a dozen people in line behind my aunt all let out heavy sighs. The manager was otherwise engaged, so it took a few minutes for him to respond. During those few minutes, the cashier apologized to the patrons behind my aunt, saying, "She has food stamps." The breathless manager looked at the cash and stamps in the cashier's hand, and looked at the conveyor belt of the food in confusion. "She has a rotisserie chicken," the girl proclaimed proudly. "You told us that food stamps cannot be used to buy hot food." He told her to simply subtract the chicken, so as not to have to re-ring the entire $100 worth of groceries, and Aunt Sheila thanked him, apologizing for not knowing the rules. The cashier tried to hand Aunt Sheila her $30 of food stamps back, but Aunt Sheila simply said, "Apply it to the bill," since everything else qualified. Then the girl got on the intercom and called for a stock boy to return the chicken. "No," my aunt objected, "that's our lunch." "But you heard the manager," balked the cashier. "You can't buy hot food with food stamps." "You're holding $70 of my cash, more than enough for one chicken," Aunt Sheila spat back at her, but the cashier refused and turned on the blinking light again for the manager. Loud groans came from the customers still waiting in line behind my aunt, and she finally lost it as her toddler, Scotty, started to fuss in the cart seat. "Fine!" she screamed in the smug girl's face. She snatched the cash and stamps from the counter, stuffed most of it into her purse, and threw down a $5 bill just as the manager reappeared. "This is for the chicken. Have fun putting the rest of these groceries back," she said in haste. She then tossed the chicken in the cart, and she and Scotty ate the whole thing in the car before spending the other $95 at the only other grocery store in town. The end. 2. So let me set the stage and take you to a magical place called the Foods Department. For a bit of context, my family does this thing called work camping. Essentially, we just hop from place to place, taking up jobs for a few months. Then, once our time is up, we head over to the next one. Every year for the past 4 years, my family has been going to this amusement park to work every summer. Last year, I was finally old enough to work. I chose to work in the foods department alongside the rest of my family, because foods just seemed like the better option. If you've ever worked in foods, then you'd know how people have pretty much zero respect to us, especially in amusement parks. And this job was no different. So on this day, I was working in the cookie stand. The cookie stand was a bit different in the way it was set up. It wasn't really a stand per se. It was more like a small building, so I'm running the register on this day, and my sister was working as a server. Her job was to put the cookies in cups, buckets, and trays, get people the couple other sugary sweets we had in there, and decorate the cookies if need be. So in this stand, we have this thing called a cookie bucket. Essentially, that was a bucket that came with an entire tray of fresh, bite-sized chocolate chip cookies. Mind you, an entire tray was about 48 cookies. There are a couple things I feel like I really need to stress here. A, these cookies were bite-sized. B, the cookies were fresh 98% of the time, meaning they were very soft. And C, 48 cookies, an entire tray. I cannot stress that enough. 48. Keep that number in the back of your head. So this park was giving out free cookie bucket coupons to certain season pass holders on this day. I still haven't the slightest clue on who thought this was a good idea, but I digress. Due to that, and it being the first day of summer, everyone decided they wanted their cookie buckets on that specific day. Once again, no idea why. So we were absolutely packed. All day we had a line out the door. And today was both me and my sister's first day. This day already sucked. Not only were we filled to the brim with customers, but the fucking register didn't work for about 1 or 2 hours. So we couldn't take cards for that entire time. Needless to say, it wasn't a very good first day. And little did we know that someone was going to make that day significantly more annoying. Enter entitled dickhead. We're doing our thing. Cookie buckets are selling like crazy. By this time, the register was working again, and me and my very new sister are trying to figure stuff out. Then she gets a customer from hell. A fat fuck in a red shirt walks up to Bailey, my sister, and gets his bucket. Bailey fills the bucket with all 48 cookies, then this happens. Note, not everything will be 100% verbatim because this took place last summer.
Why is it only half full?
The cookies are warm and fresh, so it's gonna seem like it's only half full, but I can reassure you that's a lot of cookies.
But the picture on the door says the buckets are full to the top.
That picture is just for show, sir. The buckets have 48 cookies.
But the door says they're full to the top.
They argued back and forth over it for a bit, and then he waddled his way over to me. And when I tell you I was dreading this...
This is bullshit.
I'm nervous, but trying to keep my customer service persona together. I'm sorry. There is nothing I can do. I'm just the cashier. Then an awesome woman chimes in.
Come on, you're holding up the line. Just take the bucket already.
God bless this woman. He complains a little more. Can't really remember what was said. Finally, Bailey has had enough. She angrily walked over to the phone next to my register to call our manager. Hello, Mrs. Susan? There's a man down here who is complaining about his cookie bucket. They exchange a few words, and then she hangs up. Our manager Susan comes down, and some words are exchanged. She caves, and gives this man another half tray of cookies, because apparently 48 just isn't enough. He gives me his ticket and leaves. Mind you, he got these cookies for free. He didn't even need to pay because of his coupon. So he caused an entire scene over 48 fresh and free cookies, because it wasn't overflowing with cookies like the picture on the door. Our manager left, and me and my sister went back to work. Immediately after he closed the door, I quietly muttered, "Asshole," to myself so that nobody would hear. Needless to say, my first day at my first job will be a day I'll never forget. 3. Performing solo acoustic musician here. Hellfreezer's note, it's the best kind of musician. I wanted to share a story that I experienced just last night at my gig. The time is about 11 p.m. I am in the last 30 minutes of my set, having begun at 8:30 p.m. When Karen and her date, both look to be about late 40s, come in the door, right next to which I'm set up. I'm guessing he was a first or second date or something, and not a long-term partner based on the fact that he did not possess that tired but unsurprised expression of acceptance. regarding her poor behavior. Rather, it read more of uncertainty bordering on embarrassment, as though he was trying hard to straddle the line between protecting her ego as well as his own sense of self-preservation. She is barely 2 steps over the threshold when she stops and fixes me with this oddly expectant stare, as though she is saying, "I'm here. What are we doing?" I say to them, "Hi, come on in," because I'm not averse to greeting patrons, even though I'm not technically an employee of the bar. I want people to feel warmly towards me as their provider of entertainment. She doesn't hesitate, nor beat around the bush. "Can I come up with you?" I'm a bit taken aback, but not totally thrown off. I've been at this a few years now, and it's not the first time I've been mistaken for open mic or karaoke. I reply in my best, positively phrased customer service voice. "Oh, sorry, this is solo acoustic, but please let me know if there's something you'd like to hear."
"How about Sonny and Cher, I Got You, Babe?"
"I'm sorry, I don't have that one."
"Well, any duet. I'm good for any duet."
I can almost literally see my polite words of gentle dissuasion ricocheting off her thick skull. Okay, I really don't have any duets, but thank you so much. I then break eye contact and pointedly go about my business, hinting to them that they should kindly F off and let me go back to my work. She hovers for another awkward moment, promising she'll be back while her date stands there equally awkwardly. They finally light at the 2 bar seats closest to me, Karen helpfully reminding me to let her know. I think to myself, well, whatever, I have less than 30 minutes to go. I deliberately choose a song that I think would be quite difficult for anyone to view as a potential duet. I'm a soprano, but I can capo Johnny Cash as a couple keys and pull off a pretty decent Folsom Prison Blues. I figure no way she's going to try to worm her way into this stompy, fast-paced, dude-written country tune, which I kind of play in my own way, making it even harder for someone else to find a place to jump in. How wrong I was. I'm no more than halfway through the first verse when she beelines right up to me and positions herself slightly behind and next to me, fully expecting me to move out of the way to let her cozy up to my effing mic with me. The bartender and bouncer meet my gaze, and I shrug to let them know I'm not totally freaked yet. I'm inwardly laughing at her level of sheer presumption as she hangs out there, while I effectively continue to box her out, simply not moving an inch from my original stance. I hear her emit a single strangled fragment of a verse as she tried, hopelessly, to jump in and join me, 3 feet back from the mic. It only took another few seconds from there before she realized she wasn't getting anywhere, was probably looking pretty stupid, and finally left my side. She does not return immediately to her seat, as I'm sure that would have been the ultimate humiliation. Instead, she flits to the back of the room to interrogate the bartender as to the whereabouts of the cook. I found out this later in a chat with the bouncer, and apparently was not satisfied with the response that the kitchen had already closed 45 minutes ago. How unreasonable, I know. Karen breezes back to her seat, and I can hear her very fake-sounding, high-pitched giggle here and there as she resumes chatting with her date, and I think, okay, she's still annoying, but maybe she's done harassing me now. As I'm playing through the last verse of my song, the entire room is suddenly startled by what I believe Karen thought was an angelically beautiful, briefly held high note. She literally screeched for a couple seconds while affecting a vibrato, as though to prove to me and everyone else that she can sing too, and she deserves a chance to share the stage. The friendly table of Zoomers behind her halted their conversation briefly and looked over like, "Is that lady okay, or?" If you're wondering, I didn't so much as flinched, which I'm sure was her desired response. Not outwardly, anyway. Inwardly, I was cringing for everyone's sake. I thought, okay, enough. I'm going to play originals now, so you can't even sing along from your seat if you wanted to. I looked past her, addressing the friendly Zoomers, asking if they'd like to hear an original tune. They respond sweetly and affirmatively. So I played 2 of my own songs, and am just about at the 11:30 p.m. mark, I begin my farewell sign-off but offer an encore, since the room is still pretty warm, to which Karen responds emphatically, "Yes, please." She is now my best friend. I agree to the room's request for one more, and she calls out to me again, "Can I come up with you?" This is at least the third or fourth time now that I found some gentle means of declining her unwanted advances, and I've had it. I look directly at her and say into the mic, "I'm sorry, there's only room for one," which is exactly true. Karen looks clearly miffed and says loudly and snootily to no one in particular, "Well, that means fuck you." She then busies herself with her drink. I've seen and heard a lot in my time, but the sheer dim-witted audacity of that remark actually caught me. The eyes of everyone who had been paying any attention to my set were on me, waiting to see whether or how I would respond. I bit my tongue, and resisted the urge to say something back like, "Your words, not mine, lady." I just smirked, dropped my chin, gave a tiny headshake, and played my killer last piece. If I could have been a bit quicker, I really wish I'd said back instead, "Personally, I find that a bit extreme, but if you insist." It is probably for the best, though, that I let it go in the moment. She had clearly had a few beverages elsewhere before stopping in, and I didn't want to needlessly invite potential equipment damage, should she then fly into some unbalanced, self-entitled rage and try to swat my hands down or something. I wrapped up, broke down, laughed at her with the bartender and bouncer as I got paid and took my merry self home. 4. This happened yesterday when I went to the supermarket to buy some groceries and a few other things I needed. Took me around half an hour to find everything I needed, and I was going to checkout when I remembered I would need some whole wheat bread. As I was deciding which brand I wanted, an old lady approached me and asked where she could find the rice. I'm sure she knew I didn't work there. I was wearing a black Led Zeppelin shirt with blue jeans and Converse sneakers, while the employees there wear orange and green shirts with black pants and black shoes. But since I was closer, I was the easier option. The rice was pretty close, so I took her there and helped her loading her cart. She wanted a 4.5 kilogram sack, which for some reason were sitting on high shelves. We chatted a bit about prices and quality before she left with her cart. I was considering picking some rice for myself when I heard a nasal voice and felt a grab on my left arm, turning me around.
"You finally done? Good. I'll help me finding these."
There was this 50-ish looking lady, handing me a list. From all the stories I have read, I could easily recognize a Karen's uniform and haircut when I see one. I could have helped if it was an item or two, but the list was around 30 centimeters long, and her attitude wasn't exactly right. I looked at her with a puzzled expression, and she said with a really condescending tone while snapping her fingers,
"Are you deaf? Hurry, I don't have the whole day."
I wanted to keep things civil and pointed at the employee just a few meters away from us. "I don't work here, ma'am, but I'm sure that guy over there can—"
"Bullshit, I saw you helping that old hag. I know you want your break, but you'll help me first. Hurry!"
I hate Karens, I hate finger snapping, and I wasn't going to waste more time explaining myself twice to someone not willing to understand. So I just turned my back and walked away. Of course, you guys can guess it wasn't the end. It's never that easy with a Karen, right? As you can imagine, she followed me.
"Don't you dare turn your back on me. You will help me, and you will help me now. Stop walking away. I will have you fired if you don't help me."
This part isn't exactly 100% accurate, as she was talking really fast and I wasn't really paying attention. But then, it was when I saw it. You know those little Mike's employees with cool voices used to announce prices, sales, and other things? So there was one left unattended near one of those scanning devices we use to check prices. Maybe a devil whispered in my ear, because the whole idea formed at once inside my head when I saw that mic with the blue light on. I just hoped it was on and connected. I turned to the lady and said, "Okay, ma'am, I can't help you, but I'll get someone to help you right away, all right? Is a manager okay for you? I'm sure he will be happy to lend a hand." She looked appeased and agreed with that I win smile. I knew I could have looked for an employee to help her, but it's not always we have an opportunity like this. I went for the mic and tapped it. Nothing. I take a look at it, and it was just muted. Before unmuting it, I ask her, "What's your name, ma'am?"
Karen Smugmore.
She said, as if she was someone important. I clear my throat, unmute the mic, and say the following line with the best professional voice I could. And not to brag, but I do have a nice, deep voice if my friends can be trusted. "Manager Mauricio, please, come to corridor 4A at your earliest convenience. Manager Mauricio, please, come to corridor 4A at your earliest convenience. Ma'am, Karen Smugmore, blonde, wearing white shirt and pink gym pants, needs help finding more enema kits and 4 packs of Vagisil deodorant." I would like to mention that this, including the manager's name, was fully improvised on the spot. It was great seeing her smug expression turn into I don't even know how to describe. It was surprised, offended, mortified, and stunned at the same time. I smiled at her and said, "He will be here soon. Have a nice day, ma'am," and left really fast before she could say anything. To keep myself from more troubles, I made a really erratic way until the cashier's at the furthest end of the supermarket. And on my way there, I could see some people probably found my little announcement at least entertaining. I paid for my stuff and went home. I didn't see Karen again, and no employee came after me. So I guess I'm off the hook. Yeah, I know it was petty, probably uncalled for, but letting such an opportunity pass by would be a waste. To clarify, we don't speak English in my country, so I had to translate what was said to similar terms, and this made certain things sounded unnatural, such as old hag. The literal translation of what the Karen said in this case would be just old woman, but it would lose the disrespectful pejorative tone she intended with the term she used. 5. This happened years ago when I was 19. One of my granduncles in Thailand was having his 70th birthday, so my grandma and her older sister, entitled Grandaunt, wanted to be with their brother for the celebrations. Background to entitled Grandaunt. She stayed near my family and was quite lonely as no one in the family could stand her and often avoided interacting with her. My grandma always felt sorry for her because she was her older sister. My mom still made it a point to visit entitled Grandma often on behalf of my grandma, who didn't stay that near us. By the way, she is loaded, and this will be a point raised later in the story. I decided to accompany Grandma and entitled Grandma to Thailand, as I was about to start my first year in uni in a month's time. The holiday felt much needed, plus I adored my granduncle, who was one of the greatest souls I knew. As a treat to myself before the trip, I used my own savings to buy a brand new digital camera of an older Sony model. This was before phone cameras, and digicams were not cheap, so I didn't get the latest model. My savings were all from tuition that I was giving, which didn't pay me much since I didn't have prior experience. The camera was the first ever big-ticket item I bought for myself, and it was understandably precious to me. Entitled Grandaunt was really one of the worst. She was the oldest of the group and always expected others to give in to her whims and fancy because of seniority. It didn't help that her demands were never communicated directly, but she would insinuate things through her own weird way of speaking. Grandma and granduncle pandered to her, clearly not having the relaxing time they had hoped for in catching up. On the second last day of the trip, entitled Grandma decided to extend her trip, easily dealing with the rebooking fee and additional hotel nights in her 5-star hotel. She didn't stay with us and our granduncle because she didn't think his house was glam enough for her. I was quite glad to get away from her and her entitled remarks. During lunch, when she shared how easy it was to deal with everything with money, she saw me looking through the photos on my camera. That looks like a new camera, even though I've never seen the model for a while. Yes, I got it because of the trip. For the trip? Oh good. I won't have a camera with me for the rest of the trip after you leave, though. You could buy one here. I think electronics might be cheaper in Thailand than back home too. I knew she expected me to just hand over my camera to her, but I decided to play dumb. Fast forward 1 week. She returned home from Thailand. The same day she came back, my mom asked me that night why I refused to lend my camera to entitled grandma and was rude to her. I explained the situation to my mom. Being a little doubtful, because my mom knew I couldn't tolerate her, my mom asked grandma and granduncle too. Grandma repeated the situation, but was also upset that I didn't get the hint, and made entitled grandma angry. She expected the complaint to come, so she wasn't surprised. I don't blame my grandma. Too many years of generational trauma and conditioning to always give in. Granduncle, though, loved it. He laughed so hard when explaining to my mom, and told her I handled the situation like a boss. From then, my mom just minimized all contact with entitled grandma, reducing our visits to just dropping off things from my grandma and then leaving. Never been more glad for that. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Idiots in the Wild, episode 56. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you enjoyed the video, then I would appreciate it greatly if you share it around with all your friends and family. Because we have to do our own promotion here, right? We might be lucky and we'll get caught by the algorithm eventually, and YouTube will do some promotion for us, but that comes and goes. So right now, we have to do our own promotion. Do a little legwork. So that's what we're going to do. I'll do my part, and if you guys would be so good, I'd appreciate it if you could help out too. Okay, that part's out of the way. No birthday shout-outs, but that takes us to Hellfreezer's question of the day. Right. And what that is today is I've been watching a lot of videos on people doing renovations or building additions to their homes. And the thing that kind of caught my attention is I've been wanting to do something in my back garden for a while. I can't because I don't own the house. I'm not allowed to, but I've been wanting to do it. So if I ever own the house, and I like my house quite a bit actually, in spite of my complaining about noisy neighbours and such, it's a good area, and when I'm not recording, the neighbours aren't that bad. And to be honest with you, the town I live in, also pretty good. It's got pretty much everything you need. But this isn't how awesome is every video, it's just it's good. So I probably wouldn't move, but there are changes I'd make, and one of the changes I'd make is my back garden. You haven't seen it. Maybe I'll take a picture one day when I cut the grass. I'd get that would be decimated. Basically, trees all gone. There's huge, beautiful conifer trees in there. They're gone. I've got some out front, so it's not like I'd miss them because I've got some out front. And everything gets flattened, and I get a foundation poured over half of it to build what would essentially be a recording studio, right? And it's not a huge back garden, but it's a decent space, so half of that would be a good space for a recording studio. So we'd have a recording studio in there, and that'd be half of that. Then the other half would essentially be split between a small area for relaxing and a tiny little kitchen. So basically a sink, a microwave, and a room for a kettle. Just for basics to keep you going out there, and some cupboards to put snacks and such in, and a small area just for a toilet, right? So I don't have to go back and forth while I'm working, so I'd have everything I need out there. Obviously, you get plumbing and electricity hooked up, solar panels and the like. I'd probably go for solar tiles, I think. They look nicer. That's just a preference, so. Right, now, the question I have is, not would you do it, let's assume you would do it, and I don't want to turn this into a US versus UK thing, but wherever you happen to live in the world, I do know that in the US, there's a preference, not exclusive, but there's a preference for building houses and such out of wood, and there's definite advantages to doing that. You can build a lot quicker, and maybe with certain weather conditions, it might be easier to do reparations and such. So there are advantages to it. In the UK, we generally build with brick. More often than not. You'll probably find a few houses aren't, but we generally build with brick. The house I live in, made of brick. And that, personally, is my preference. So if I was going to build a structure like that, it would be built using brick. Now, what would you like to build yours out of if you were to build such a thing? An extra bedroom, a home office, a naughty dungeon, whatever you might use it for. Should I cut that part out? Screw it. Whatever you might use it for, not judging, what would you make it out of? Okay. And with that... maybe I should cut the naughty dungeon part out. Anyway, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, and just notice I've stopped moving my head around as much while I'm doing these. Because I observe, I notice. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.